If there's one director that I respect more than most others, it's Shinji Mikami. He's made some of my favorite games of all time, and consistently tries to reinvent what certain genres can be like, either by taking the lead himself, or fostering talent like he did with Tango Gameworks. But that doesn't mean he's infallible, far from it. And the biggest example of that might just be his second directorial work ever. You've read the title, of course you know what I'm talking about. The original Dino Crisis is by all accounts a pretty standard horror game. If you've played Resident Evil, you mostly know what to expect. You move around with tank controls across rooms with fixed camera angles, trying to avoid the evil residents lurking around every corner. And you occasionally solve puzzles along the way and collect keys. The gimmick here, however, is that instead of zombies, you've got a bunch of dinosaurs. While both RE games that predated it let you choose to play as one of two different characters, Dino Crisis only lets you play as one, Secret Operation Raid Team Operative Regina, who is sent in to apprehend crazed scientist Edward Kirk on a remote island after he has found a way to open a rift in time. Unfortunately, there's a tiny problem. Because of the rift, there's dinosaurs everywhere on the island, and the dinosaurs themselves are easily the highlight of this game. As Dead Rising famously tells us,
zombies are stupid and slow.
The whole reason the remake added Crimson Heads to Resident Evil 1 was to make them more of a threat. Compared to them, the dinosaurs are absolute beasts. They're fast, aggressive, and more importantly, really dangerous. They can cut off your path, knock your weapon out of your hand, forcing you to pick it back up again, and they can even make you bleed, which causes you to lose a lot of health over time until you patch yourself up with a hemostat. On top of that, you can now also move with your weapon already drawn, which gives the game a way faster and more frantic pace than any of the Resident Evil games before it. There's even laser traps you can activate to stop the dinos from chasing you. All of these are fantastic changes. It's just a damn shame that they decided to fuck up everything else. For one, since the game was made primarily for the PlayStation 1, and unlike Resident Evil they wanted it to be entirely modeled in 3D, rendered in real time, it can only handle so many things being loaded in at once. So whenever there's a big set piece anywhere, you know for a fact that you're perfectly safe because the game just can't load in the dinosaurs, which completely destroys any and all tension. And because the game seemingly isn't tame enough, you also now have infinite saves that are triggered automatically every time you leave a safe room. You also have 5 continues before you need to actually reload your save. And this is something I'm really miffed on. I actually quite like having to ration out my ink ribbons, but you know what, if you want infinite saves, then that's fair. What I can't get behind though is the continues. They completely trivialize all of the game's hardest parts. The second big issue though is how they completely butchered the item boxes. Instead of just letting you store your items and move on, you now have to use individual plugs to open them up first, and then on top of that, they're color coded. So the inventory between boxes is only shared across ones from the same color type. This doesn't add tension, not at all it does is add tedium. And then there's the most game-breaking issue in the entire game. The puzzles. I'll be the first to say that Resident Evil never had any particularly amazing puzzles. If I had to choose, 3 probably has the best ones in the series, but even then it's no Silent Hill. Dino Crisis, meanwhile, has some of the worst puzzles in the entire genre. Okay, well, that might be a bit misleading because this implies that there's many puzzles. Not really. There's one that keeps being reused over and over and over, and it gets worse with each and every time you do it. Frequently, you'll run into locked doors that need a special device to open them. After combining their respective code and input disks, you get a cipher, which you need to decode to actually unlock the door. At first, this is a fine enough gimmick. It's neat and neither too difficult or easy. Then they make you do it again, and again, and again, and again. And after a certain point, the ciphers become genuine bullshit, because they're both way too long and actively ridiculous. As if that wasn't enough, these codes make up like 60% of a playthrough on average. On my first playthrough for the game, I genuinely ended up dreading every goddamn new door more than any dinosaur encounter, because at least if I die to a dino, I know it's my fault. But you barely fucking fight them. More often than not, you're just walking through empty giant rooms that can't even handle the dinos being in them, and then you pray to God you don't have to do another goddamn cipher puzzle. It completely destroys the entire game experience. Dino Crisis is this close to being good, hell, even great. But it fucks up in so many places that count that I can't call it anything other than a tedious experiment that didn't work out. Because despite all there is to love, it fails to ever coherently come together at any point. And honestly, this is why it pisses me off so much whenever I see some Capcom fanboy gush all over it. Because I know for a fact that this game is only popular with people who've never played it. They just watch someone else play it on YouTube and imagine it in their head as what it could be, rather than what it actually is. That being a complete and utter mess.
Editing height here. I forgot to mention this in the script, but honestly, all Dino Crisis games might have some of the worst soundtracks Capcom has ever produced. Yes, I'd put them on par with the RE1 DualShock Edition basement theme. So if the background music in this video has been ear-grating, now you know why.
But still, coming off of the success of Resident Evil, Dino Crisis did do well enough to warrant a sequel. And unlike the first game, this one decided to go into a very different direction. But before we get to that, there is something else I would like to discuss first. It's really not uncommon for Japanese games to get manga adaptations. It happens so often that I've covered multiple of them on this channel, and they've been happening for about as long as the home console games themselves have been a thing. Naturally, where there's success, there's imitation, and in particular in Hong Kong, a bunch of unlicensed manhwas were being created based on popular video games. And so, in order to get a footing in that region, Capcom licensed some of their IPs to a comic production company there, namely Jade Dynasty Productions, which might just be the most badass name for a company of all time. And this studio was certainly something. Sit down, kids. It's time for a history lesson. You see, JDP was founded by one Tony Wong Chun Long. And in case you're wondering how this is relevant, he is also the producer of the Dino Crisis manhwa. See, originally he created and worked for a studio named Jade Men Holdings. Despite being a very popular comic author in the region, he did eventually resign in 1989, though he did want to come back at some point, except when he tried to buy his company back, he was promptly arrested for fraud, which he committed in order to get the funds for the buyback in the first place, ending up with a 2.5-year jail sentence. After being released, he funded Jade Dynasty as an oriental type of Walt Disney. His words, not mine. This didn't work out, because you see, the quality of their was generally seen as shit. All of this is to say that the Dino Crisis comic is just as bad. Since Dino Crisis 1 doesn't have much of a developed story, they had to take some liberty. The problem is that it made some inconsistencies that caused the already done plot to be even worse. But no, that's not the real issue. The real deal breaker is the art. It ranges anywhere from pretty solid to really bad. There's absolutely no consistency, not in proportions, not in room design, hell, even the art style can randomly shift into a completely different one in the very next panel. It's an absolute mess, but if nothing else, it's very entertaining. As for what Mr. Wong is up to these days, as far as I understand it, he's currently busy building a theme park in mainland China. After Dino Crisis, Mikami took a step back from directing for a year before starting development on the Resident Evil 1 remake in 2001. The directing role for Dino Crisis 2 went to one of the first game's designers, Shu Takumi, being his directorial debut. He would then go on to make Ace Attorney and Ghost Trick. To this day, Dino Crisis 2 remains his only directed game that's not an adventure game. And you know what? This might just be his second best work right behind Ghost Trick. Unlike the first game, Dino Crisis 2 is not a survival horror game. Instead, it's full-on action. And it's one hell of an action game at that. The game takes place a year after the first game and follows Regina and new US military TRAT team member Dylan as they travel through time to rescue survivors from the suddenly disappeared Edward City and bring back information on the third energy experiments from the first game. You constantly swap between the two throughout the game, with each having their own arsenal of weapons and special tools that let them explore different areas. Regina generally has faster weapons with lower damage, while Dylan's arsenal packs more of a punch, but is generally slower. Ironically enough, this makes Regina leagues stronger than Dylan because of how the game's combat works. While tight controls and fixed camera angles are retained, the environments are back to being pre-rendered, and consequently, the game can have a lot more dinos on the screen at the same time. Since there's now a focus on combat, the pace has been increased dramatically too. You can now equip 2 weapons at the same time, a main gun and a secondary. You also have a dedicated dodge button and can still attack and ready your gun while moving. The dinos, meanwhile, have been made significantly more aggressive. The game constantly throws a dozen at you at the same time, and they'll run you down, jump at you from all sides, flank you, and even try to cut off your path. Let your guard down for even a second and more will spawn in to surround you. And believe it or not, that's a good thing. Hell, a great thing even. All thanks to this game's scoring system. Every dinosaur you kill adds to your combo counter. The more you train together, the higher your score you get. If you take too long between kills or get hit, your combo meter resets though. Manage to get through a room without taking any damage, and you get an additional amount of points based on how many dinos you killed in total. Why does this matter, you ask? Well, this game functions in the same way that Mikami's own Piano 3 on the GameCube does, wherein your score translates 1-to-1 to your money. You can use your extinction points at any save terminal in the game to either refill your ammo, expand your weapon's max ammo, or buy entirely new gear or even health items. Stuff like bleeding still carries over from the first game, so hemostats are a thing too. However, instead of a survival horror inventory, your gear is now split into 3 sections: weapons, key items, and health items. The first two have infinite space, and you can freely swap between all of your purchased weapons whenever you feel like. Health items, meanwhile, have a limited inventory space, and most of them only stack twice. Consequently, you have to constantly keep in mind what items are worth keeping around, as even the continues that were just a basic gameplay feature in the first game are now an expendable item. In a pinch, you could even use one as a full heal. At first, playing an action game that controls like this, that handicaps you for playing poorly and demands you do everything faster and more effective, might be overwhelming. But sooner or later it just clicks, and eventually you're gonna start blowing dinosaurs out of the sky before they can even land a hit on you, narrowly dodging attacks and single-handedly causing a second extinction. This right here is the missing link between Resident Evil, Onimusha, and Devil May Cry. And just between you and me, I actually like this game more than any of those series before their third entries. And don't get me wrong, I say this as someone who adores the first 3 Onimushas and Resident Evils. Dino Exterminator over here is just that fun. And just to make sure that you never get bored, the microsecond you could possibly start getting tired of the combat, the game throws you into a gimmick of some sort. Be it a turret section, a chase, or a whole ass actual tank section. It falls into the same category of action game as, say, Zone of the Enders, the Second Runner, one of my all-time favorite games. It's constantly throwing some new set piece at you that keeps it fresh, and while not every gimmick is a winner, the constant variety never gets old. And now that the game has been re-released on PC, both on GOG and Steam, for just $10, it's as accessible as it'll ever be. If you've never played Dino Crisis 2 before, then I implore you to give it a try. If there's one thing I can criticize, however, it's the soundtrack. The best way I can describe the music in this game is chaotic. It just doesn't sound quite right. Either way, this game is easily one of Capcom's best action games to date, and an absolute blast from start to finish. It's also really short, endlessly replayable, and after beating it, you unlock a whole new side mode with 2 parts. The first is a horde battle mode, where you get to play as different characters and try to survive unending waves of dinosaurs. The second, on the other hand, is a full-on fighting game, letting you play as the dinosaurs themselves. Now this is what gaming's all about. Before we continue on with the games, there's some stuff I'd like to discuss first. For one, both of the first 2 games got short novellas included with the respective games' official guidebooks. The first is just a prologue to the game's story, while the second includes both a prologue and an epilogue. They're fun, but by no means necessary to understanding the plots of the games. Not that it really matters because, well, Dino Crisis plots aren't exactly good. Aside from that, the series also got 3 spin-offs for mobile phones in the early 2000s. Dungeons and Chaos, Dino Egg, and Dino Genesis. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any archives of them online, and the only one I was able to get footage of was Dungeon and Chaos, which as far as I can tell was some sort of FPS dungeon crawler type of game. Dino Egg, meanwhile, seems to have been a competitive puzzle game, and Dino Genesis looks like it was something like a monster collection game. Though obviously this is complete speculation on my behalf, don't take any of this as gospel. The next real game in the series is a bit of an odd one. I've actually talked about Dino Stalker on this channel before in my video on the Resident Evil Survivor game. It's the 3rd part in the Gun Survivor trilogy, and narratively a direct continuation of Dino Crisis 2. I don't like repeating myself though, so for the sake of completion, I'll just add the segment from the Survivor video here. So, Dino Stalker, huh? Well, since we're back in the console-only territory, they actually put a bit more work into the story again, and it's, really stupid, even for Dino Crisis standards. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not anti-Dino Crisis. Sure, I will admit that I think that 1 and 3 are absolutely terrible games, but 2 rocks, and I much prefer the action direction that the series took on with that game. But that doesn't mean that I'm just going to sit there and nod when you give me a story about a World War II fighter pilot being randomly transported there. Well, maybe I wouldn't be so harsh on it if I could actually hear what's being said. Maybe I missed some settings in the options, but I couldn't find any subtitle options, and that's kind of a problem when the audio mixing is bad enough to make Sonic Adventure 2 sound listenable.
What's that sound?
As for the game itself, first things first, how are the controls? With a light gun, honestly not too bad. You still walk with the D-pad, not the stick, but this time you actually turn with it as well, with the A and B buttons being relegated to strafing. To reload, you again shoot off screen, but you still can't manually look up or down, which makes this the 3rd game in a row with a really jarring problem that would have been really easy to fix. But I digress. This game actually uses a very similar weapon system to the second, with a default gun with infinite ammo you've got equipped at all times, and a large arsenal of secondary weapons you can pick up, some of which also have infinite ammo. You can swap between either at will with the C button, and use a scope mode by pressing A and B simultaneously to zoom in, though this one is pretty much entirely useless. On the gamepad, on the other hand, Jesus fucking Christ, it doesn't even matter how good or bad anything is because of one singular flaw that shatters the entire experience. The sensitivity is all over the place. You can use either the stick or the pad to move around. If you use the latter, everything's really slow and it makes turning to get the dinos a giant chore. But if you use the stick instead, it's so sensitive that it starts shooting around like crazy. I made some friends try this, and some of them straight up ended up experiencing motion sickness. Pair this with the fact that you once again have full free aim, this time by using the right stick, and it makes this hands down the worst of these games to play with a controller. But let's say you're playing this with a light gun. How's the game itself? Gone are the arcadey gauntlets from 2, or the interconnected map from 1. Instead, we still have a level structure which varies between either linear rail shooter stages, where you shoot enemies in a circular area around you, and large open stages, where you follow the directions on your minimap until you find the goal and fight a boss. The former are perfectly fine and actually quite enjoyable. Sure, it's no Time Crisis, and no small part thanks to the chore that is slowly moving your side around, but they get the job done. The ladder though? Oh my lord, what a mess. These stages are massive, and despite seeming like there'd be a lot to explore, are actually quite empty. And the reason for that is simple. Every stage runs on a timer like in 2, but if it runs out here, you instantly die. You can recharge it by shooting these weird time crystal things in every stage, but go off the beaten path and explore too much and you'll quickly waste a lot and get nothing in return other than a higher score and kill count, leading to a death by timeout because your walking speed is extremely slow. Why was the first game the only one with a run function? This also makes avoiding enemy attacks really annoying. So to compensate, the game bombards you with health items. Dino Stalker feels like it was this close to being a genuinely really fun game. The shooting is fun and responsive. The dinos actually engage you unlike the zombies in the first 2 games. The weapon variety is fun. I especially like how the revolver is really strong but has insane knockback. And the story is so ridiculous it loops around to being super funny, even if for all the wrong reasons. But because of this game's insistence on open areas and freeform movement like in the first 2 games, combined with the worst gamepad controls in the series yet, it just falls short of being good. Now a year later, Gun Survivor managed to put out one final entry that managed to turn its own series around, and it remained on the PS2. Dino Crisis, meanwhile, moved to the way more powerful Xbox. I don't like Dino Crisis 3. I don't think I'm gonna play it anymore. I don't know if this will destroy the validity of the review, but I really don't like it. And I'm not gonna beat it. I'm just gonna stop replaying. The first and last time I actually finished it was years and years ago, involving a lot more, playing this game is less like playing a game and more like an exercise in frustration. It's exactly as bad as people say, if not worse. I don't even know where to begin explaining just how much this game does wrong. Story, space station, dinosaurs. You get the drill. The problem is that this game plays absolutely horribly. On the surface, it's just a faster version of 2's combat system since they've added a jump and a jetpack with a dash. Even the extinction point system is basically still there. The problem is everything else. I'm sure you've noticed it from the footage already, but your greatest enemy in this game is the camera. It just keeps jumping around like a kid on a trampoline. This game feels like what people who refuse to play games with fixed camera angles think they're like. It's disorienting to the point of inducing motion sickness. Doesn't help that every time you dash, the game throws on the world's worst PS2 motion blur effect on a system that didn't have to do that. Since you're also no longer on tank controls, the perspective shifts also often lead to you going back and forth across the same 2 screen. And of course, because they added a jump, every room has a lot of verticality now. If you think the camera on foot is bad, you've seen nothing yet. On air, it's borderline impossible to actually tell where the fuck you're going. And don't think for even a second that the map could help you out. Even Metroid Prime has a more competent map system. Whoever decided that you should have to toggle through every individual room in a parallel sequence needs to be shot. But even if all of these issues weren't so bad, the game would still be dogshit because the combat itself is so insanely limp. In the second game, every weapon had weight. They were punchy, the enemies reacted accordingly. In this game though, you only get 1 gun and 3 ammo types and none of them have any weight behind them at all whatsoever. It also takes years to kill even the most basic enemies. It feels like you're shooting with Nerf pellets. To offset this, your sub-weapons have been replaced by wasps, drones that automatically attack enemies for you. You know, Capcom's new Pragmata, which I 100%ed yesterday as of writing this, has a weapon that functions identically, and seeing it genuinely felt like giving war flashbacks. The wasps are actually pretty solid, and are the only weapons that feel like they get fucking anything done. Too bad you run out of them so quickly it won't even matter anymore, because they even felt like locking doors behind using them up. Even spending your extinction points has been butchered beyond belief. You can now only carry 1 of each health item, and you need to spend extinction points to be able to carry more. Yeah, increasing the cap costs money now. Which would be fine if wasp ammo wasn't so expensive, but since they're the only weapons that actually do literally fucking anything, you're gonna be spending most of your XP on them and them alone. Everything about this game comes together to make for a perfect shitstorm of complete and utter dog shit. There's a damn good reason why nobody ever talks about this game. Because while Dino Crisis 1 might be bad, 3 is something much worse. Borderline unplayable. And so ends Dino Crisis, one of Capcom's most bizarre series. Born from a decent idea, expanded into a fantastic action game, and then completely failing to evolve the concept before crashing, burning, and killing the entire series potentially forever. However, with how popular the series somehow is with people who've never played it, I don't doubt that Capcom is inevitably going to bring it back someday. Exoprimal is like halfway there, I guess, but we've not had an actual Dino Crisis game since 2003. And personally, I would love to see what the series could be like in a post-RE4 DMC-free Onimusha-free world. But for now, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. And honestly, I'm all for Capcom making more original IPs instead, like Pragmata. But still, should they decide to revive the series after all, I'll definitely be here to check it out. With all of that said, I wish you all a wonderful morning, day, evening, or night. Cheers! I'm going to go exterminate some giant chickens.
Ready?